Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here today with the Downward Spiral. Each week, I review the episodes of the Promised Neverland season 2 as they come out on Toonami Saturday nights at 1:30 in the morning. This last night was episode 8 of the season. So I'm just going to give a quick synopsis of the episode and then give my general thoughts on it as my mind slowly deteriorates. So, at the start of this episode, we go back to the flashback from the end of the last episode where we see what happened to Norman after he was taken to the tunnel where he was presumably at the time killed, and he meets a man named Rattree. So this man tells him, "Hey, do you want to join Project Lambda?" And Norman's like, "Well, I have to because you're going to kill me if I don't." So he joins, and we see a flashback of his time at Project Lambda, where he gets experimented on along with some of the other members of his group. And we find out that Norman was able to escape using the ability to create explosives, which blow up the project. And he and some of the others escape, including the people we've already met in this season. So then after this, we basically go to where Emma, Ray, Gilda, and Dawn are, where they're trying to find Sanju and Mujika to bring to Norman to basically prove to them, hey, we can find a way to solve this without killing all the demons. So basically, they spend the 4 days, and on the fourth day, they get attacked by that weird spider demon thing that's kind of been around this whole season. And then basically, Ray had to save Emma for one of them. And right as they're about to get killed by another one, Sanzu and Mujika, noticing that Emma had dropped the pendant that Mujika gave her, were able to track them down and save them at the last instant. Then right then, they tell them basically, we have to take you. They agree. And then right as that happens, you see explosion in a nearby village off in the distance, where we see that Norman and his pals have induced their attack on the village to more or less test out their drug, which appears to be excess. All the demons are dying. They're all mutating to other monsters. And basically, at the end here, you have Norman in the village, cloaked, approaching the old man from earlier, the from the temple scene where Emma helped him out, where he shouts the name of Emma. We believe referring to Emma, Emma who did help him in the temple, so we think it's referring to her. But no, his granddaughter happens to also be named Emma. What a quinky dink! So basically, they have this heartfelt moment, and it turns out as Norman stabs him, he reveals that he was given the blood of Mujika in the past, so he did not have to eat humans. So he feeds the blood to his granddaughter so she can be safe. And then basically, the episode ends as Emma gets there, confronts Norman, and then she sees Norman as a crying 5-year-old kid. So overall, my opinions in this episode are it's hard to explain them. They're very, very mixed in a way. Overall, I'm going to go into some of the stuff I really hated about this episode. First thing is just the whole flashback with Project Lambda. In the manga, this felt a lot was much more fleshed out. For example, I mentioned the guy's name is Rachi, right? Well, in the manga, that actually has a lot of meaning that's thrown away here in the anime. Let's just leave it at that because I would go on like a 30-minute rant about this if I continued onward. But and ultimately, what we were led to believe was that, okay, Norman was totally lying to Emma. He was experimented on. He didn't just take tests. However, from what we see, the only thing he did that wasn't take tests was he was given drugs. And then the thing that I pointed out, and a lot of other people pointed out, probably the most discussed thing about this episode was the fact that, okay, knowing that there are 6 cameras in his bedroom alone, not counting the countless cameras throughout the rest of the facility that are being watched 24/7 by demons, how did no one notice this one guy building bombs, not just building bombs, but enough and higher quality bombs to basically blow up this whole high-tech facility that happened to kill all these demons, all these human lab scientist guys, but spare the other test subjects and just enough demons to experiment on themselves. That is as plot contrivant as it got this season. No, this season had a scene where the kids were literally saved because demons came out of nowhere and killed G.I. Joe, you know? But that just felt so hilariously poorly done. Like, for example, I'm going to give a counterpoint. The George Orwell novel 1984. Winston Smith, the main character, theorizes that the telescreen, which is in every room in this society, was served as a camera, so they were being watched all the time. And since the thing was on the wall, he theorized that if he wanted to do activities that might seem sketch, he'll have to do them in the small areas that are not directly being in view of the telescreen. So that's why he was able to set up a table towards like the wall, the front wall, where he had the journal and he wrote down, "I hate Big Brother, I hate Big Brother, I hate Big Brother," over and over again. And that plan still fails at the end, by the way. So he took all this precaution to be careful and failed. But Norman, who's arguably being even more heavily watched, just gets away with building high quality bombs here. It's just so stupid. It was so contrived, and like at the same time too. And also, like, you have these different cuts also, like, during when Emma and the other gang are trying to find Sanju Mujikov, like, Norman and his guys clearly not following the promise that he made to Emma, and that, yeah, they're totally gonna set up this attack. And then, like, you have these scenes where, like, Norman is just, like, staring off in the distance, sounding so damn edgelord. It's insane. You can argue, like, well, the time Project Lambda made him more jaded to the world and made him more radical and screwed up with his mind. At the same time, you need to be able to show that. And having to fit this whole flashback of Project Lambda in like 3 minutes completely ruin any chance of doing that. Like, for example, you could talk about something like The Shining, which is ultimately a case study into seeing how this one guy slowly and slowly gets driven more insane by this mansion. Thing is, that movie's like 3 hours long. We only had 3 minutes here. You had no shot to really effectively show this. So really, it just goes from even Tokyo Ghoul did a better job of this, where you at least saw a scene where Kaneki was getting hardcore tortured. That was nearly the length of an entire episode, and at the end, him just snapping and going edgelord. That made more sense than this did, and it's because we had to infer all this. We didn't see enough to really be able to draw that conclusion without having to really go out of our way and extrapolate this. And that was just so frustrating to do. Like, and he said I guess, infamous line from the manga where he's like, "I can be the devil, I can be an angel," or something like this. I forgot the exact wording they used. And it reminds me of the type of kid, like 15-year-old emo kid who like hates his parents, like upper middle class, like white kid who would like hates his parents, and he'll go to his room and he writes in his journal. He thinks he's being a poet, by the way. He thinks he's the next Edgar Allan Poe. He goes to his journal and he begins his poems by writing, "I am God, I am Satan." And then he just creams himself because he thinks he just wrote the most profound piece of literature in human history. No, you didn't. You're 15 and you're an asshole. There, I said it. But hey, and again, at the same time here, and it sounds like I'm shitting on this episode. I am shitting on this episode. I am not going to give this episode a good grade at the end, by the way. But the end is the part that was mixed to me. The part of the actual attack, and the part with the old demon and his granddaughter who happened to be named Emma. I can definitely see how someone watched this and thought this was actually really, really good. I fully understand that. It didn't necessarily work for me because this whole thing revolves around this was centered like the parts where they show like the demons panicking. I'm honestly kind of surprised they showed all that because mostly because Tanami likes cutting anything scary out of its episodes at this point. It has a history of cutting stuff out. I'm surprised they let this all in. Actually, they might have cut stuff out too because I have been noticing the time length for these episodes. I've mentioned it a couple times. And I thought it was weird how the length of an average episode this season was like 19 and a half minutes. This episode barely clocked in at 18. So maybe Tanami silently cut like a minute or a minute and a half of stuff out. And the only type of people who will know that are people who watched the sub when it first came out and people who watched the Tanami version last night. If you watched both and you like notice like a scene cut out, can you please tell me? Because it feels like they cut something out at some point. And in a way, they did a good job of this, but it revolved around Norman. Because no, you could have focused on all these demons panicking. A lot of them who are like generally, I guess, innocent. They didn't do a good job of showing this because the only demons we got to know in this village are the two guys who tried killing Norma. Oh God, I almost said Norma, guys. Ray and Emma, and they were assholes. But then they're like, no, they're taking care of these two kids. It, the season does not know how to write frickin' characters at all. Like they've done a horrible job with new characters. Honestly, they haven't done a good job with the older characters. Like this season's completely nerfed Emma. Like Emma was like this awesome, borderline straight up badass character. This is the same girl who just on a whim cut her own ear off, guys. And like this season, she's been borderline useless. Like literally, when the kids have like an issue, it's generally Ray who ultimately saves them. And that's just something I've noticed this season. And even in a weird way, it feels like unless they absolutely have to use Ray in the scene, he's kind of just pushed to the background. But again, that's kind of nitpicking, honestly, compared to stuff in this episode. Back to that final scene. I can definitely understand how someone liked, especially the interaction of the old guy from the temple, and his granddaughter, who happened to be named Emma, and like that moment they shared, really humanizing them, which I will give them credit for characters you know almost nothing about. They actually did a reasonably decent job on that scene with that. But at the same time, the one thing I hated was at the end of the episode when like Emma approaches Norman and the last shot is like her view. She sees him as like a crying 5-year-old holding this dagger. And it's the type of thing I hated in Tokyo. I really hated at the end of Tokyo Ghoul. I can excuse how bad they rushed through things with the plot. I can excuse how they screwed over Toka as a character. The one thing that lingers in my mind with that is how desperate they were to be artistic. And one thing I specifically remember was when I believe it was Kaneki and his best friend who happened to join like the army at the scene were like in the cafe together, and like you had moments where like the light would like get bright and then get dark, and then someone says a line, it gets bright, it gets dark, and they're trying so damn hard to be artistic when there's so much plot that needs to be done. It feels like oh crap, a tornado's headed to my house, let's rearrange the chairs in my bedroom. That's what it just felt like at that point. But again, at the same time, though, I could kind of get what they're going for too. Like the whole Emma has known Ray since they were little kids, so she's always going to see him as that little kid who has his vulnerabilities. She does not know him as the guy who got tortured by Project Lambda, the guy who went full Rambo, you know? And I can understand that, and I will give them some credit where it's due. That was not an entirely bad idea to do right there. But at the same time, though, I f- before I finish this, I kind of want to do what I would have done if I had this script. If I was given like this episode to write or make edits to make it better, I would have elucidated or perhaps written in that the drugs Norman was given in concurrence with his tests was to see absolutely how far we can drive the human mind. And we hit a point with the drugs and with Norman's already high intellect where he's able to hit superhuman levels, as in he gets telekinetic powers of some sort. They cross some threshold where the brain can control things outside the body. And that would explain possibly how you can remotely build bombs that no one sees. That actually wouldn't be well explained, but that's probably the closest to a rational explanation you could get. And that instead of needing a detonator, he used his brain to set off the bombs, which could also explain how he set them off in such a way that it killed exactly who he wanted, left who he wanted alive. And you could talk about how they keep seeing him as a god. Like, one thing that stuck out to me is when he came to save the other subjects, Barbara specifically was like, "Are you a god?" while crying. And that really brought to me, like, and especially their cult like devotion to him, how they started seeing him as this like higher being of sorts. And this really goes into like there's this concept in literature, especially in literature from Christian nations, of the Christ figure. This is a character who's written, usually this is the main character who's written to be like a giving, caring individual who at some point ultimately sacrifices himself for the greater good of others. Playing off of the story and narrative of the life of Jesus Christ. So, and basically, in a way, this could be written such a well to be like a weird take or almost a perversion on that take, where you have Norman who's given these unnatural powers, and he refers to himself as a god and as the devil because he has this ability no human or even no demon will ever have. He is effectively greater than all these people. He's effectively serves as a god to these people in such a way. And he warns, I can be your savior, I can be your god of destruction. And for the demons, he decides to be their god of destruction, their god of mayhem, and basically the god of the Old Testament to them by extinctioning them, by genociding them. And he does such to basically protect the humans, to be their loving, charitable God. But I don't trust the show to be able to effectively show that because they, instead of like him like being like this more silent, stoic character, which you can have stoic characters be two completely messed up things. At the end, they tried making him look like a 14-year-old whose parents let him watch the Joker movie. It's basically what he looks like. Or like he thinks Jared Leto's Joker is like the end all be all best character of all time. And that just frustrates me, honestly, because little writing changes here and there could have made this amazing. And then you can contrast this with Mujika in a way, where she and arguably could be considered her own version of a Christ figure, but in a much more wholesome way, where she goes out her way to save people. She is a demon, yet she does not hunt humans. You can really play in this, especially like her blood, the blood of Christ, her blood saves people. You can really build on this in such a way, but I don't trust how the season's gone. I don't trust them to really effectively build on this well. And people can be like, well, Japan's not a Christian country, so, oh, why would you think they would do a Christ figure comparison? Okay, Japan has had this weird history where they do sometimes like go into Christian lore in a way. Like for example, Fire Force, the female like firefighters are like nuns. Like and they talk about cathedrals. They use all this religious terminology in that. So I think anything Christian in anime is fair. Again, Evangelion was basically half of it was just biblical lore, you know. And again, I really feel like if it was under the right writing this season, and the manga I think had these issues too, could have been done so incredibly well. Like instead we have like this thing that's going to be known as arguably the biggest disappointment of 2021 in anime. When if handled right and if they play their cards right with what they had, they could have made the next Evangelion, you know, in my opinion. But what do you guys think? I'm trying to rate this episode. It's actually a 5 out of 10 because I will give them credits for how they tried that last scene. I will give them credits because I can get into the minds of what they're thinking of, and I do not blame them. And I kind of get what they're going for. I like it better than last episode, actually. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this episode? Do you think that the Promised Neverland Season 2 will magically turn into Evangelion? Leave your comments, leave your opinions down below. I love reading them for like this content. If you want more wacky Tanami news and content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.